It was a warm summer evening on July 18th, 2022. My friends and I decided to spend the night at Sunset Beach, a secluded spot known for its stunning views and serene atmosphere. We were a group of 5, myself, Ezra, Mika, Rowan, and Lila. We arrived just as the sun was beginning to set, casting a beautiful golden glow over the water. At 7:30 p.m., we set up our campsite near the dunes, laying out blankets and lighting a small fire to roast marshmallows. The beach was quiet, with only the sound of the waves gently lapping against the shore. It felt like we had the entire place to ourselves. As we sat around the fire at 8 p.m., Rowan, always the storyteller, began to recount the local legend of Sunset Beach. "They say this place is haunted," he said, his voice low and dramatic. "Years ago, a young woman named Clara drowned here under mysterious circumstances. Some say her spirit still roams the beach, looking for her lost love." We laughed it off, but as the night grew darker, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. Around 8:30 p.m., Mika noticed something strange. "Look," she said, pointing toward the water. There, in the fading light, we saw what looked like a figure standing just beyond the surf. It was too far to make out any details, but it seemed to be watching us. We tried to ignore it, but the figure didn't move. When we looked back a few minutes later, it had vanished. Ezra suggested it might have been a trick of the light, but none of us were convinced. The eerie feeling lingered, and we decided to stay close to the fire. As the night wore on, Lila and I took a walk along the shore to clear our minds. We chatted about work and life, trying to shake off the creepy vibes. When we turned back at 9:30 p.m., we noticed a set of footprints in the sand. They were fresh and led straight to where we had seen the figure earlier, but there were no footprints leading away. Back at the camp at 10 p.m., Ezra and Rowan were gathering more firewood while Mika kept an eye on the fire. Suddenly the wind picked up, and we heard a faint whispering, almost like someone calling our names. "Did you hear that?" Mika asked, her face pale. We nodded, all feeling the same chill run down our spines. Just as we were about to call it a night, we heard a distant cry for help at 10:30 p.m. It was a woman's voice coming from the direction of the water. Without thinking, Ezra and Rowan grabbed a flashlight and ran toward the sound. The rest of us followed, our hearts pounding in our chests. We searched the beach, calling out, but found nothing. The voice had stopped, and the only sound was the crashing waves. We decided to head back to the camp, feeling more unnerved than ever. When we got there at 11 p.m., our fire had gone out, and the air felt colder. As we were packing up at 11:30 p.m., Lila suddenly gasped. "Where's Ezra?" she asked. We realized he hadn't returned with us. Panicking, we split up to look for him. We searched the beach and the surrounding area, but there was no sign of Ezra. Just as we were about to give up, we found his flashlight near the water's edge at midnight. It was still on, flickering weakly, but there was no sign of Ezra. The fear was palpable now. We shouted his name, our voices echoing in the night, but there was no response. In the distance at 12:30 a.m., we saw the figure again, standing where we had first seen it. This time, it was closer, and we could see it was a woman, her clothes dripping with water, her face obscured by wet hair. She raised a hand, and we felt an overwhelming sense of dread. In the blink of an eye, she was gone, and so was any hope of finding Ezra. Terrified, we decided to leave immediately. We packed up our things as quickly as possible and ran to the car. As we drove away at 1 a.m., we looked back one last time at the beach. It was dark and empty, as if nothing had ever happened, but we knew we had seen something that couldn't be explained. The police conducted a search, but Ezra was never found. The official report said he probably drowned, but we knew better. Sunset Beach was haunted, and whatever spirit lingered there had taken our friend. To this day, we never speak of that night, and none of us have returned to the beach. It's a memory that haunts us all, a reminder of the terror we faced and the friend we lost. Tony, who hadn't joined us that night, listened in stunned silence as we recounted the events. "That's insane," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I knew there were stories about that place, but I never thought." "Do you really think it was a ghost?" We could only nod, the weight of that night still pressing heavily on us. "Whatever it wasn't human," I said, "and it took Ezra." The haunting of Sunset Beach remains a local legend, a cautionary tale for anyone who dares to visit. We were the unlucky ones who lived it and will never forget the night we came face to face with the unknown. It was August 12th, 2023. My friends and I had planned a weekend getaway to Driftwood Beach, a secluded spot known for its picturesque driftwood and rugged beauty. We were a group of 4, myself, Max, Ava, and Leo. We arrived just as the sun was beginning to set, bathing the beach in a warm orange glow. By 6:30 p.m., we had set up our tents near a cluster of large driftwood logs that provided some shelter from the wind. We built a fire and started cooking dinner, the smell of grilled meat and vegetables mixing with the salty sea air. At 7 p.m., as we were eating, a man approached our camp. He looked disheveled, with tattered clothes and wild hair. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice rough and unsettling. We exchanged uneasy glances but nodded, trying to be polite. He introduced himself as Carl and sat down by the fire, but something about him felt off. By 7:30 p.m., Carl had begun telling us strange and disturbing stories about the area. He spoke of disappearances, ancient rituals, and strange creatures lurking in the water. His eyes gleamed with a manic intensity as he spoke, making us all uncomfortable. Max tried to change the subject, but Carl kept going, his stories growing more grotesque and terrifying. At 8 p.m., Ava excused herself to use the restroom. She headed towards the edge of the forest, flashlight in hand. After a few minutes, we heard her scream. We rushed over to find her, pale and trembling. "There was someone watching me," she stammered. Carl just chuckled, saying, "The forest can play tricks on your mind." By 8:30 p.m., the atmosphere had grown tense. The wind picked up and dark clouds began to gather overhead. Leo suggested we pack up and leave, but Carl insisted we stay, saying the storm would pass quickly. We reluctantly agreed, though we all felt a growing sense of dread. At 9 p.m., as the storm intensified, we heard strange noises coming from the forest. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling, and faint whispers carried on the wind. We huddled closer to the fire, feeling increasingly vulnerable. Carl seemed unfazed, almost enjoying our fear. At 9:30 p.m., Leo decided to investigate the noises. He took a flashlight and ventured into the trees. Moments later, we heard him shout. We found him standing over what looked like a small makeshift altar, with strange symbols carved into the driftwood and remnants of burnt offerings scattered around. "What the hell is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. By 10 p.m., we confronted Carl, demanding to know what was going on. He laughed, a sinister sound that sent chills down our spines. "This is an ancient place," he said. "The spirits demand offerings, and they will have what they want." His eyes were wild, and we realized he wasn't just a crazy storyteller. He was part of something dark and dangerous. At 10:30 p.m., Carl grabbed Ava, dragging her towards the altar. We tried to stop him, but he was surprisingly strong. "You can't leave now," he snarled. "The ritual has begun." Panic set in as we realized we were trapped. The storm raged around us, lightning illuminating the terror on Ava's face. At 11 p.m., Max and I fought to free Ava from Carl's grip. The struggle was fierce, and it felt like Carl had an unnatural strength. Just when we thought we were losing, a bolt of lightning struck a nearby tree, the flash and thunder momentarily blinding and deafening us. managed to pull Ava away from Carl. The storm seemed to reach its peak with wind howling and rain pouring down in sheets. Carl stood by the altar, chanting in an ancient guttural language. "We have to stop him," Leo yelled over the storm. We gathered what courage we had left and rushed him together. At midnight, we overpowered Carl and tied him to one of the driftwood logs, using ropes from our tents. The storm began to subside, and the oppressive feeling lifted slightly. We quickly packed up our things and ran to the car, leaving Carl behind, his wild eyes following us as we fled. The police were called, and a search was conducted. They found Carl still tied up, but he refused to speak. The altar and the symbols were investigated, but no definitive conclusions were drawn. We never returned to Driftwood Beach, and the memory of that night still haunts us. The fear, the helplessness, and the realization that we had encountered something truly evil stay with us. The legend of Driftwood Beach grew after our experience. It became known not just for its beauty, but also for the dark rituals and the man who claimed to serve the spirits of the land. We were the unlucky few who encountered it, and will never forget the night we barely escaped the clutches of a true nightmare.